Have you ever felt cursed by your own clarity, as if you could see things no one else seemed to notice? A glance slightly out of place, and you sense something is wrong. A smile that never quite reaches the eyes, and you feel the exhaustion hidden beneath it. Someone says, "I'm fine," but deep down you know they're not. Others ignore it, but to you, those are cracks that cannot be concealed. Jung called this capacity differentiated perception, a rare ability that allows certain people to pick up unconscious signals invisible to everyone else. And he warned, it is both a gift and a danger. In his clinical notes from 1913, Jung described a patient who could walk into any room and immediately sense who was lying, who was suffering, and who was harboring resentment. He wrote, "This patient possessed an extraordinary ability to perceive unconscious material in others, yet it caused her far more suffering than it did advantage." Do you recognize yourself in that description? If so, you are not alone. What you carry is not a pathology, but an encounter with a layer of awareness that society is not prepared to face. And that is precisely why this ability can destroy you, or it can open the door to liberation, depending on how you choose to wield it. The truth is, seeing more than others is not just an ability, it is a burden. You realize this in the middle of conversations that seem harmless on the surface. Others laugh and joke, but you hear the shortness in someone's breath. You catch the tremor hidden in another person's words. These details are like shards of glass cutting through the fragile illusion of harmony. And because of that, your very presence becomes unsettling, even when all you are doing is seeing. Jung explained that society operates on what he called unconscious agreements. We silently agree not to mention fear, to hide resentment, to pretend that everything is fine. A person with a differentiated perception breaks this agreement, and the backlash comes quickly. You are labeled as negative, accused of reading too much into things, judgmental, or worse, a troublemaker. Jung called this the phenomenon of the scapegoat. When one individual reflects the collective shadow, instead of acknowledging the truth, people channel their hostility toward the mirror itself. In Psychology of the Unconscious, he wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most would rather attack the mirror than face what is reflected." And this is the trap you find yourself in. You see, but you must pretend not to see. You hear the truth, but you must stay silent to preserve the peace. That silence does not bring peace. It only imprisons you between two realities, one that plays along on the outside and another that grows heavier inside. This is why you feel exhausted even when nothing obvious has happened. Ironically, this is also what leads you to doubt yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I just imagining things? But Jung confirmed, this is not an illusion, and it is not pathology. It is consciousness developed to a level that becomes dangerous for social existence. So, the real question is no longer, why am I like this? But, what will I do with what I see? Because that vision, if denied, will consume you. But if embraced, it can become the very strength that shapes the path ahead. Jung once recorded many patients who were remarkably similar to you. In his 1913 clinical notes, he described a woman who could walk into any room and instantly know who was angry, who was hiding their pain, and who was lying. He wrote, "The patient exhibited an extraordinary ability to perceive the unconscious content in others, but this capacity caused her far more suffering than advantage." This is what Jung referred to as differentiated perception. It is not an illusion, not imagination. It is a rare psychological function, a heightened sensitivity where you can register unconscious signals most people simply overlook. Ask yourself, how many times have you seen someone smile, yet deep down you knew they were falling apart? How many times have you sensed an argument about to erupt long before anyone raised their voice? That is not a coincidence. That is the mechanism within you at work. But like a radio that is too sensitive, you cannot choose the channel. You pick up everything. The music, the static, even frequencies that others cannot hear at all. And that overload is what leaves you drained. Others can easily ignore it, but you end up carrying the weight of what they refuse to see. Jung warned, the danger does not lie in perception itself, but in the isolation it creates. That is the paradox. Your strength becomes your wound because it separates you from the collective. Yet Jung also recognized another truth. This is not pathology, but a form of evolution of consciousness. He called such individuals pioneers of awareness, those who live ahead of their time, seeing what the majority will eventually be forced to confront. The problem is not that you are broken. The problem is that you were never taught how to live with this capacity. Jung once said, whatever is not made conscious will return as fate. But before it becomes fate, it usually first becomes an enemy. That is why society so often turns against those who see too much. Imagine a group of friends keeping a secret. Everyone knows the wall in the house has a crack, but they all agree to hang a big painting over it. The unspoken pact is, we'll pretend it isn't there. Then you walk in, and with just one glance, you notice the painting doesn't cover it. You don't have to say a word, but your eyes alone are enough to break the pact. The group instantly feels uneasy, and instead of admitting the crack, they blame you. You're too negative. You just like to stir up trouble. Jung called this the mechanism of collective defense. Instead of facing their own shadow, people prefer to attack the one who reflects it. In Psychology of the Unconscious, he wrote, when the shadow is mirrored back, the unconscious has only two options: integrate it or attack the mirror. And most people choose to attack. You've probably seen this yourself. You tell a friend they look sad, and they snap back, no, I'm fine. You warn your boss that the project has risks, and they dismiss you. Don't be so pessimistic. But when the truth eventually collapses, everyone acts as if they never heard your warning. You weren't wrong. You just disrupted the unspoken agreement to pretend together. The danger is, when this reaction repeats often enough, you begin to believe you're the problem. You start doubting your intuition, censoring yourself, muting your own insight just to stay accepted. But that is exactly how you betray yourself. Jung warned that this is not just social isolation. It is also the risk of inner disintegration. Because when you constantly absorb the emotions of others without acknowledgement, your boundaries begin to blur. You live in a fog, and over time, you can't tell which breath is yours and which belongs to someone else. Jung called this phenomenon participation mystique, the dangerous fusion into the collective psyche. And this is the heaviest price. You lose your own inner voice. But here's the twist. You are not being opposed because you are wrong. You are opposed because you are too right. Society needs the fabric of shared illusions to function, and you are the one tearing the veil. People do not hate you. They hate what you force them to see. This means the loneliness you are experiencing is not proof that you don't belong. It is proof that you are touching a level of awareness that the collective is not yet ready for. And once you understand this, you stop blaming yourself. The danger never lay in your ability to see clearly, but in not understanding why others fear that clarity so deeply. This is why Jung called this recognition one of the most dangerous discoveries. It threatens not only the individual who possesses the capacity, but also shakes the unconscious agreements that keep society standing. And if you stay with me until the end, you will see why this ability, the very one that once made you doubt yourself, can become the foundation for a kind of freedom most people will never reach in their lifetime. Imagine you're carrying a radio that never turns off. While everyone else tunes only to the channel they want, you receive every frequency all at once. Music, news, commercials, static. At first, it feels like a gift. You can hear more. You sense what's coming before it arrives. But slowly, the chaos becomes torture. You can't turn it off. You can't lower the volume. And instead of enjoying it, you live in constant overload. Jung called this ability differentiated perception. It makes you like that radio, picking up signals most people don't notice. You know someone is anxious just from the way they breathe, and you sense conflict about to erupt from the tension in the air. But like a radio with no tuning dial, you can't choose to ignore it. Every signal rushes in. What drains you is not the clarity itself, but the fact that you are forced to live with all the static others never have to bear. Where they easily skim past pretense, you cannot. They hear the melody, you hear the orchestra, and the off-key instrument behind it. And this is where the tragedy begins. You become the outlier because your presence feels like an alarm no one asked for. Society needs its pleasant channels to maintain the illusion of peace, while you detect the dissonant sounds humming beneath the surface. They don't truly hate you. They hate the noise you reveal. But here's the shift. The radio is not meant to be your curse. It is meant to be your instrument, if you learn how to use it. You can train yourself to adjust the dial, to filter, to choose which frequencies matter instead of being flooded by them all. You don't have to become the siren that warns everyone else. You only need to let it guide you toward what is real and ignore what is nothing more than static. This metaphor matters because it reframes your gift. Clarity is not a punishment. It is an ability that demands refinement. And once you learn to tune, instead of drowning, you'll finally begin to hear the music you were meant to follow. Look back at yourself. How many times have you turned into a radio with the volume stuck on maximum, picking up every frequency until you can no longer hear your own voice? You sit beside someone, listening to their story, but instead of enjoying the moment, you strain to catch every bit of static, the pretense, the fatigue, the uncomfortable silences. You leave the meeting not heavy from the words themselves, but from all the unconscious signals you accidentally absorbed. You don't realize it, but every time that happens, you layer another wave of someone else's noise onto your own system. An angry coworker, an anxious family member, a friend hiding their tears. They all become burdens you carry as if they were your own. Slowly, you begin to blur the lines. What truly belongs to you, and what is only the echo of someone else. And the price. Sleepless nights replaying the sounds of others in your head. Mornings where you wake already drained, though you did nothing physically demanding. Moments when you force a smile, but underneath, all you can hear is the relentless static drowning out any sense of joy. Jung once warned, when you let yourself dissolve into the collective noise, you lose your personal boundary. You are no longer yourself. You become nothing but a loudspeaker repeating the world's hidden anxieties. If you continue this way, never learning how to tune the signal, the consequence won't just be exhaustion. It will be inner disintegration. You will lose the ability to distinguish your own voice from the echoes of others. You will become someone living in constant chaos, never certain what truth is yours to keep. And that is the deepest tragedy. Not that you see too much, but that you allow everything to pass through you without choosing. At that point, the inner radio is no longer a gift. It becomes a sentence that pulls you further and further away from yourself. Maybe you've lived too long like a broken radio, every channel blasting at once. You're exhausted, you feel abnormal. But the truth is, you're not broken. You just haven't learned how to tune the signal. This is the first inversion you need to hold on to. It's not that you're the problem. It's that your clarity is demanding a different way of being used. Jung called this the problem of the superior function. When a rare capacity is misnamed, it becomes a burden. But once it is recognized and directed, it turns into a sign of being ahead of your time. You are not too sensitive. You're simply picking up signals most people never notice. Think of it this way. The radio inside you doesn't need to be silenced. It just needs someone to adjust the dial. Others hear one channel, you hear 10. That doesn't make you defective. It makes you the one with more choices. The question isn't, how do I shut this off? But, which frequency do I choose to live on? And here comes the second inversion. You are not the source of trouble people once labeled you as. You are the one who reminds them of the cracks they refuse to face. They avoid you not because you are wrong, but because you are too right. What you carry is not a curse, but evidence that you stand at a higher frequency. History has proven this. Those who saw too soon were called mad, dangerous, or even traitors. Yet they were the ones who opened the path. Jung wrote, "The bearer of a superior perception becomes the container for what the collective is not yet ready to acknowledge." In other words, you are not an outcast. You are the signal keeper of a layer of consciousness the world will eventually be forced to face. But here lies a warning. If you identify yourself only as the one who sees everything, you will fall into the abyss of arrogance. Jung called this the inflation of the superior function, believing you must save everyone, expose everything. That is not power. That is self-destruction. Real strength lies in choice. You have the right to choose when to open and when to quiet down. You have the right to use this ability to light your own path instead of carrying the weight of convincing the entire world. That is the difference between being controlled by the radio and becoming the one who adjusts the radio. And here is the final inversion. The danger is not that you see too much, but that you haven't yet learned how to see wisely. When you learn to tune, the static will fade, and only the signals needed for your journey will remain. Instead of asking, "Why am I not like them?" you can ask, "If I were born to hear more, then what is my responsibility?" That question doesn't make you a victim. It makes you a pioneer. And one day you will realize, the very ability that once drained you is the gift shaping the deepest freedom and resilience within you. You cannot change the fact that you hear more than others, but you can learn how to tune the signal so you don't drown in it. Jung believed the difference between exhaustion and growth comes down to something very simple: the ability to choose what you let in. First, create a pocket of silence each day. 5 minutes of deep breathing, a short walk without your phone, or simply sitting still. This is when you lower the volume on every external channel so you can hear which voice actually belongs to you. Second, practice writing down what you notice instead of holding it all in your head. When you put it on paper, you no longer carry everything alone. The page becomes a filter, helping you see which signals matter and which ones are just static. Third, choose your environment carefully. Not every place, not every person deserves you with your radio turned to full volume. You have the right to turn it down, not to become numb, but to protect yourself. That isn't selfish. It's discipline. Finally, change the way you respond. Not every signal you pick up needs to be reflected. Sometimes it's enough to acknowledge silently, "I see it." That's all. You are not here to fix everything. These small steps are how you reclaim the dial. This ability was never a curse. It only becomes a burden when you let it play noise without pause. Once you learn to choose the frequency, you don't just survive, you begin to live with clarity. Let's be honest. If you keep letting the inner radio blast every channel at full volume, the ending is clear. You will burn out. Each day will feel like you're trapped in a crowded room, where every voice collides and drowns out the one voice that truly matters, your own. At first, it just feels like fatigue. But over time, you lose direction. You no longer know which worries are actually yours and which ones are only echoes from others. Jung called this the disintegration of the ego, when your boundaries dissolve and you're no longer the subject of your own life. The greatest cost isn't loneliness, it's the loss of yourself. You become a loudspeaker for the world's anxieties instead of someone living by their inner voice. And that is a silent death, not of the body, but of the soul. But if you dare to change, if you learn how to tune the dial, the outcome is completely different. When you take control of your own radio, you'll notice something strange. The world is no longer as noisy as before. The same people, the same situations, yet you're not consumed anymore. You begin to hear your own melody again. And that is the very quality Jung believed could save you: inner freedom. You no longer have to pretend just to fit in, nor are you crushed by the collective noise. You see clearly, but you don't collapse. You hear much, but you know what to keep. The ability that once exhausted, you now become the shield that protects you from illusion. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And differentiated perception, if defined and used correctly, is exactly the path to that privilege. You no longer live asking, "How do I fit in?" but instead, "How do I stay true to what I see?" What was once dangerous now turns into power. The power of someone who dares to filter, dares to stand at the edge, dares to look into the shadow without letting it drown them. And once you hold that quality, no one can ever take it away. Think of this ability as a compass hidden inside your chest. Others may follow the collective map, but you can hear a private needle humming every time you drift away from the truth. At times, this compass exhausts you because it never falls silent. It trembles softly during shallow conversations, and it shakes hard when you stand inside an atmosphere full of concealment. Yet if you learn to trust it, you'll see that even when the entire world denies it, that needle still points in the same direction. You don't need to shout to prove what you see. You only need the courage to walk in alignment with that small needle, one step at a time. Jung once reminded us, "Those who carry a different consciousness will always be lonely for a while, but they are the ones who open the way." So, this week, try one simple thing. When your intuition vibrates, don't silence it. Write it down. Keep it as your secret map. One day, when you look back, you'll realize an entire path has already been drawn by that compass. And perhaps, at another threshold, there may be a door waiting to open. A place where you are no longer the only one listening, but where others are also following that same trembling signal.